So let's talk about peering coordinators. So as we are putting up the presentation for the sake of time, as we are putting together the presentation, I think it's very important to understand that peering is important. But in an organization, everyone, you cannot take anyone and then he becomes a peering coordinator. You need a specific person who will be looking at peering, looking at the policy within the organization, and then developing the peering for the organization. That can be a specific person, or that can be someone who is already in your organization, but to whom the responsibility of developing peering has been given. So let me go quickly to my presentations. Okay, so we'll be talking a little bit about the introduction to peering within Africa region, and then interconnection, and then peering economics, because peering is not technical mainly, it's more about economics. What the benefits about peering is mainly about economics. Then the peering coordinator and the negotiation aspects that the peering coordinator needs to be aware of, and or skills he has to have or she has to have. So I have a map that shows Africa. I'm going to describe it. It shows Africa, the inline or terrestrial fiber. So when you're talking about peering on a local scale, like in Ethiopia, we're talking about an exchange point, ADIX, and so on and so forth. But that's not only peering. Peering is about the connection, the infrastructure, the data centers, the policy, the coordinators, and all that, content, and so on and so forth. So I have a map that shows Africa. I think if you've been here for the past 3 days, there was a map that was showing Africa inland fiber interconnection. So what that diagram shows, so it shows that Africa inland terrestrial fiber has developed. When you look at that fiber map, you see that in the southern part, there is density of infrastructure. In the eastern part, there is density of infrastructure. In the western part around Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, there is infrastructure. What we need to see more is more infrastructure in terms of interlinking east, central, west, north, and probably more densification when it comes to a southern part. So I think you've seen that map of Africa. So you see that the yellow part, so the map on the left is an old archived map that showed it in 2008, I think, the infrastructure that was there. But we have now more densification. We have more fiber going across different regions. What we want to see is more fiber passing from east to Central Africa, DRC Congo, and then probably exiting this way, so that probably it brings more resilience within the continent. In terms of exchange points, there are many in Africa, 57 for now, in 48 cities, 36 countries. There are still some countries without exchange point, unfortunately. But as Internet Society, we are trying to see how we can develop even exchange point in those countries. Algeria, Eritrea, Central African Republic, South Sudan, you name them. There are many around. Submarine cable-wise, the continent has been, I would say, blessed in a way, because more capacity in the few past years have been quite growing. What we need to see is that capacity growing into the continent and helping, connecting, and bringing more resilience into the continent. So there are many things that are happening. I think you've heard about the low Earth orbit Starlink kind of product coming up, which is quite good. It is bringing diversity. We've heard about FTTH for the past few years that are connecting residential with high capacity, which is quite good also. But what we need to see is more trans-regional infrastructure, east, west, north, and so on and so forth, so that we can bring more diversity as far as the continent is concerned. As Internet Society, we are looking at, we had a vision in the past that was called 80-20 vision that was aiming at, by 2020, being able to capture 80% of the capacity to stay within the country. Past 2020, the new vision that we are looking at is in selected markets and countries, we are looking at keeping 50% of the capacity or the traffic within the country. In Ethiopia, we are looking at keeping 50% of the internet capacity or internet usage within or accessible from Ethiopia, not fetched from outside. That's the objective that we are looking at. In terms of economics, I think it's very important to note, we've talked, I think someone mentioned this, private and public. Public peering is when we have a public place where people can do peering. For example, ADIX, Rhinex, KIXP, NAP Africa, Jinx, and so on and so forth. But there is another aspect that is happening, which is called private peering. When service providers are not peering through a public place or a public exchange, they do what we call private peering, okay? Private peering does not scale, that's the problem. If you're in a market where you have 10, 20, 30 operators, you can't do private peering because you need to create unique path with each and every one, which does not scale. But to some extent, people can say it is cheap. It is cheap as long as you have few networks, but it becomes not manageable when you grow and you increase in number. So in terms of in this context of Ethiopia, let's say, or let's say a country without Central African Republic, they don't have an exchange point. We've mentioned that there is many disadvantages of not having an exchange point. Foreign currency export, local traffic exchange far away. Actually, when you are exchanging your traffic far away, you are developing that economy. Let's say in Rwanda, if we don't have an exchange and we are exchanging our traffic within Nairobi, we are developing Kenya economy, but we are putting our own economy at a disadvantage. So having an exchange locally will help really even curve out or reduce the foreign currency export. Sorry, this is a type of currency. I wanted to write currency. Okay, high latency. So when you have high latency, there are some services that you cannot offer, real-time services, mobility, IoT services, and so on and so forth. Trading services that you cannot offer. High latency routing, security risk. So when you are sending your traffic out broad, there are chances that it can be looked at, modified, delayed, or anything can happen. So there are many cybersecurity issues. What happens when you have an exchange locally, so you're removing many of the disadvantages, you are reducing the costs, you are improving and optimizing your IP transit. It means your IP transit is only used for traffic or content that is not locally available. So this is quite important that you improve a lot of things. So someone was asking, let's say this blue network on my left side is the bank, okay? The bank used to be connected to the internet and doing local traffic and international traffic through that link. What will happen is that once they have, they put together a link to the exchange, they can serve the market through this infrastructure and then just leave this link only for internet traffic that can be used for something else that is not locally available. So there is a lot of things that can happen which are quite good. Even if there is a cut here, a fiber cut. Recently you've heard about East Africa, fiber cut along East Africa subsea cable or West Africa. The economy continued to function within Rwanda. Of course, there are some services that stopped. For example, Microsoft Authentication, which is based in South Africa, was stopped, so we couldn't access our Outlook or any other things. But most of the other traffic I could access my bank, I could pay Momo, I could pay anything, but there are some services I couldn't do because of the fiber cut in east of Africa. So all these responsibilities are in the hands of what we call the peering coordinators. The peering coordinators are people who are really focused on developing and establishing peering relationships with your organization, with other organizations. Okay, from the perspective of Teshome and Addix, they also develop peering policies for the exchange. So what a peering coordinator is not, he's not a salesman, of course, he's not going to sell, he's not a product manager or a BGP expert or a network architect, but he has to have all those qualities. He has to be able to give or to explain the benefits of peering to a bank technical director. But he needs also to be able to explain the benefits of peering to a non-technical person in a layman language. Okay, so the technical skills are important, the social skills, because people who are in charge of peering should be people who are social. You should not be an introvert, someone who doesn't talk to anyone, and hope to be a good peering coordinator. No, you need to be social. You need to approach people. You need to find interesting potential opportunities, engage in the conversation. You need to understand the business in which your organization is in and what are the advantages of your organization, and be able to explain, articulate them clearly to potential peering partners. You need also to have a legal understanding, because when you're establishing a peering policy, it's a legal binding argument that you're establishing. So it's very important to understand what are the clauses that are in those agreements, what are the advantages, and also what are the different requirements and roles and responsibilities of the different parties. So all these skills are important for the peering coordinators. Okay? As you are a peering coordinator, there are some events that you need to be attending. One, in Africa, the first one is AFPIF, Africa Peering and Interconnection Forum. For this year, it will happen in Lagos, Nigeria, around 19th of August. Please, I think as the registration is open, look at the agenda, look at the different discussions that will be available. Register. You can register for an in-person experience. Come, fly to Nigeria, or you can follow remotely, because there will be also accessibility from a live streaming perspective. Africa Internet Summit. Has anyone participated in an African Internet Summit in the past? Show of hand. AFPIF. Okay. Any regional peering forum which is not, let's say, West Africa Peering Forum, East Africa Peering Forum, SAFNOG, ZNOG, no. MINOG, Middle East, appearing, okay. Oh, all those are events that you can take advantage of and then participate in that. European Peering Forum, it's also a good place to get a good mix of North and African participants, and globally also. Other like Capacity Africa, Europe, Global Peering Forum, Regional Peering Forum, West Africa Peering Forum, National Peering Forum. So we are having a peering day today in Ethiopia, and my hope is that next year you will hold another one. Okay? You can do it over one day, you can do it over 2 days, but it's very important to have a peering day that will also attract the kind of, banks, local players, but also the kind of meta and so on and so forth. Okay? So those are the meetings to attend as a peering coordinator. Know who is attending. As you're attending those events, know who is attending. Prepare those meetings in advance. Schedule meeting before you arrive. I want to meet you. My interest is, by the way, when I was coordinating Rhinex, it is at one of these events that I met someone who put me in contact with Akamai. And a few months later, we were able to bring Akamai within Rwanda and install the CDN. So those events are very important. Schedule meetings ahead of time. Send out friendly and English-speaking people. Don't send someone who cannot communicate. It's very important to send someone who can communicate and be able to express the benefits or the what you're looking for. Okay, so those are the key things. Peering negotiations, as we mentioned that, these are the top 5 motivations for peering. So when you're approaching someone, you need to understand these 4 aspects: either lowering costs, either improving user experience, or having a better control over routing strategy, or using usage-based billing, explaining why you want to do peering with this network. And also, you can also be selling transport capacity. It's also possible. So those are the different selling points or motivation points for you to be selling peering. It's very important that you understand your network. If you are a cloud service provider, you need to understand that you are not a consumer of content. You are a pusher of content. You are someone who is selling content. If you are an enable network, you need to understand your network. So the first point here is, who are the market customers? Understanding them correctly. What makes the market and the network, where does that traffic come from? Where does it go? So you have to have those at your fingertips. Does your network architecture allow to expand? Okay. Ben was mentioning that they're pairing with 10G and 100G LR. So understand, are your network capable of doing 10G? Is it capable of doing 100G? And it's not only that. You can do 10G, but you are not able to backhaul it. Okay? That is also something that you need to understand. Have facts, figures of your network profile. He mentioned being on PeeringDB. It's very important to have your information PeeringDB, but it's very important also to understand the different point of presence of your network, the different capacity, what you're able to consume, push, and so on and so forth. So we are going to talk about peering policies. Probably I will not dwell too much onto that. You need to know how to approach someone with different peering policy. You may approach someone who has an open peering policy. There is a way to approach those. There is a way to approach what the networks that are having selective peering policy and those who are having restrictive peering policy. So depending on those different policies, you need to see how to sell that agreement, how to sell that the advantages that you're bringing to that network, okay? Let's say I'm approaching Ben. I'm operating a network in Ethiopia. The thing that I need to know, first of all, that is Meta open or selective or restrictive. Once I know that, what are the advantages? How many networks? How many users? How many prefixes? What is my connectivity? Those are the selling points that I need to have at my fingertips as I'm approaching whoever I want to do peering with. So yes, the most important, difficult thing to do is to do peering with someone who has a restrictive network policy. Restrictive means that he does or they don't do peering at all. But you need to convince them why they should do or have peering policy. I'm not going into too much of the details, but once you have access to the slides, you can dig deeper. Okay. So devote a person for peering in your organization. It's a full-time job, or at least it's very important that you understand that the person has to have a focus on peering. It's not something that you do by the way. No, you have to have an objective of 2025. This year, I will meet XYZ networks. I will go and attend these meetings, and I will have these prospects. I will push this content. For example, today I don't have any peering. All my traffic passes through transit. I can have an objective and say 30% of my traffic this year will be through peering. This is an objective. So that person has to have that focus and that responsibility. Okay? Design your network so that it is flexible. Create viable strategy. What is your strategy for your organization? The more visible you are, PeeringDB is one aspect of being visible. The other way of being visible is to sponsor. You can sponsor an event. You can sponsor a peering day like this one. Your visibility will be uplifted. Okay. Ben mentioned about pairing DB. I won't go back too much into that. And the other thing is to send the right person to the right meetings. Okay. For example, for me, in our team, there are people who may be talking about pairing in Middle East. It's not necessarily me who will be going, but I have people from the Middle East that can talk to the Middle East people. So send the right person to the right crowd, which is quite important. Okay. I think that's all for my first presentation, and we want also to thank Mark, Tinka, Gital, and Martin Levy who have helped to put together this presentation.